can do whatever the Hyundai you want.
Hey, I'm Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
G'day, I'm Marcus Ambrose.
Hey, this is Kenny Rose, and you're listening to
The Fuel Pod.
This podcast covers all things motorsports. It's unfiltered, it's unabashed, and
Ooh, we're going crazy. How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to episode 57 of the Fuel Pod. He's going the distance. He's built for speed, and obviously, I'm talking about Max Verstappen. We had a crazy weekend in racing this weekend. We had three pretty unique races. We had one of the shortest F1 races that we can possibly get as far as lap distance. We had a NASCAR race that was actually more like F1 should probably be. We had an IndyCar race that's more like F1 is now. And then, of course, we had F1 race this weekend, which was not only short, it was like part go-kart race, part children's nursery, and I'm going to get to that shortly. But I got to tell you, and this is how you know it's crazy, is that I'm going to open with NASCAR tonight because they did something unique this weekend. They were in Chicago, in Grant Park in Chicago, pretty much close to the evening time, which was weird because of the weather. It was wet, so they were on wet tires. Wait for it, on a street course. They were on a street course. So, hey, welcome. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Redbeard, Diddy, Farmer, thanks for being here tonight. Anyway, Chicago street coursing, Grant Park, just outside the main downtown area. And folks, I don't know if you got a chance to see this race, even if you go on and watch highlights or you go on Peacock and watch the actual race. It was wonderful. If you're on TikTok and social media this week, I think you'll find that it's pretty much polarized a lot of not only the fans and the press, but also the drivers and teams. I think there were some drivers that didn't like who the winner was, and we'll get to that later because we have plenty to talk about when it comes to this race. But it was a great race. It ended up getting shortened, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well. But this was a very tight course, but not difficult. If you looked at the track, it was literally a lap around the park. The turns were rough because they were narrow, even though we saw NASCARs going too wide through there right at the beginning. We had Reddick and Denny Hamlin was on pole, and they went too wide into a turn that I wouldn't have went too wide in a rickshaw. So, there's that. So it was a cool race to be sure. But let's get through it. So Hamlin was on the pole. It was really wet at the beginning. If you saw the park in the middle of the track, it was just absolutely soaked. Turn 6 in lap 1. We had our first incident between Brad Keselowski and Eric Jones. It was a spin out. And that was 6 turns into it. So that was pretty soon. Folks, and we got to talk about these tire barriers. So, I'm used to seeing tire barriers. I'm used to seeing the Tech Pro walls and whatever they're using to keep cars safe and keep drivers safe. But these tire barriers were probably 6 to 8 tires deep, 4 to 5 tires high, and they were absolutely full of water because of the rain. So every time these guys hit these things, they just exploded. There were some crazy tire barriers. Lap 2, Hamlin, he full sent into a turn they shouldn't have sent it into. He slid out and hit the wall. They were experiencing no grip. And while NASCAR is used to running road courses, they're not used to running street courses. And so my hat's off to these guys because I felt like they did a great job this weekend. And we'll talk about some of the comments in the post interviews in a little bit. But Kyle Busch was one of my favorite spinouts, not because I'm not a huge Kyle Busch fan, but because he went windshield deep into the aforementioned tire walls. So his car was completely up under the tires all the way to the windshield. And he's on the radio going, guys, the car's fine. Just somebody come help me push this thing out, which you won't hear in any other form of racing. Maybe rally, but not a lot of you watch rallies. So here we are. But in NASCAR, you'll hear stuff like that. Those guys will be like, hey, just come help push me out. And he finally was able to get back on the track. Bell wins stage 1. Jenson Button, 2009 Formula One world champion. is coming around the final turn and the pit lane entry was in a weird spot. And the announcers were saying he was trying to enter pit lane, which I don't think he was. I think they're absolutely incorrect on that. He had already went past that. And then somebody nailed him in the back end, spun him around, and then of course he did that classic F1 move where he basically burned himself out into a 180. But as he's doing that, he's broadside on the pit lane as Joey Logano's coming through, and I don't know how they missed each other, but they did. It was fun to watch. Anyway, Bell wins stage 2. So at this point, we've got some weird drama going on, and this is where we have to stop and talk about Shane Van Gisbergen. And not because he's not talented. He's great. I'm not even actually talking about him. I'm talking about the NASCAR sportscasters. So, and maybe he goes by this, but they called him SVG all day because it really felt like they just did not like saying Van Gisbergen. And it's not that hard. You know what I'm saying? They've been saying Brad Keselowski for 20 years. They've been saying, AJ Allmendinger, Dingalinger for years and years and years. It's not really that hard to get out the words Van Gisbergen. One of the guys was saying Van Gisbergen, and he sounded like the fucking cook on the Muppets. You remember the big furry mustache guy on the Muppets? It was like Hergensbergen, Gisbergens. But anyway, just say his name. They kept calling him SVG and VG, and one guy called him SVGA, and I'm pretty sure that was a typo in his notes. But anyway, or autocorrect or something, but it came up as SVGA. Anyway, this guy turned it on in the last part of this race. And needless to say, he gets to the end. He's in probably I want to say 3-4 lap shootout with Justin Haley. Haley didn't give it up easily. He did not. He fought him, but I think when you look at Van Gisbergen's this one, yeah, absolutely, man. This is who I was talking about, the Swedish chef, the Hergensbergen. Anyway, now that's gonna be stuck in my head for the rest of the night. But anyway, Haley. Van Gisbergen's background is supercars. So he was right at home on this street course because he runs on street courses. And it was actually Kyle Busch that ends up giving him the most props, I thought, post-race. But he really put on a display and basically a clinic. It was so good that Kyle Larson was like, I'm behind them watching this show between Haley and Van Gisbergen. And he was like, all I'm doing is wondering, what's this guy going to do next? And I'm paraphrasing Kyle Larson, but he was like, I just wanted to know if he thought we were any good. And I think Larson was underselling because the NASCAR drivers are very good at what they do. They're not used to this, and they stepped up to the challenge. So my hat's off to the entire grid of NASCAR drivers this past Sunday. The race got shortened because it got started late, and it got shortened from 100 to 75 laps, but the teams didn't find this out until lap 45. So my question to you guys, and something to ponder and think about this week if you're a motorsports fan, is as a team, how do you adjust to whatever your team's strategy is on lap 45 when you thought you had 55 laps left and now you've got 30? So that's what I was thinking about when I saw it, but something to think about if you haven't thought about it. We did have, everybody thought this race was going to be an absolute pile-up disaster. And there was one big one. It was about 11 cars. There was nowhere for them to go. It was complete pandemonium out there. The fans were going nuts, and I hope for good reasons. I hope they were just excited about the racing and, not cracking on NASCAR with the wrecks. But, okay, these guys are still on the Swedish Chef. If you're not watching the show, start watching. Get on YouTube and watch the show because these guys are stuck on the Swedish Chef thing now. So that's the only comments we're getting. Just to give you an example, here's some Diddy Putt Pie action with the Schwergen. So anyway, it was a great race this weekend, and that's why I wanted to open with it. I thought Shane Van Gisbergen did a great job, and I hope he sticks around. I think Jenson Button was doing okay. He was definitely doing a lot better than he did in his previous NASCAR outing. So I'm looking forward to him staying on the pole. Also, a great win for Trackhouse Racing in the Project 91 car. So good job. All right, so IndyCar. That's coming up next. We're going in order of excitement. And you don't know how bad this hurts me to say it because as a huge Formula One fan, we'll get to that in a minute. I don't even want to start right now because it's going to get ugly if I do. Whoa. Where'd that happen? Okay. All right, so IndyCar was at the Mid-Ohio road course this weekend. Decent race. It wasn't as good as the past few weeks in IndyCar, and I think a lot of that had to do with the course itself. There's a lot of ups and downs, a lot of elevation in it, but it's not crazy tight, and the guys raced pretty much single file a lot. You didn't see anybody getting too crazy. Right at the beginning, we had Marcus Ericsson uncharacteristically getting wide on a turn and coming down into Rosenquist and pretty much flipped up on top of his car, and it would eventually end Ericsson's day. I think Rosenquist got back out there, but it did definitely ended Ericsson's day. Grosjean finished the race, so I guess that's a plus if you're a Formula One fan. He did finish the race. Alex Palou, folks, is for real. I don't know if he's going to stay in IndyCar or not, but he is putting on a clinic the past couple races. Scott Dixon made a pretty big comeback this week, coming in P2. Was excited to see that. Some other notables: Christian Lundgaard, former F1 driver, he came in fourth. I don't know how that happened. Don't even ask me. McLeod, pretty much after that, it's everybody you've seen in the top 10. Will Power, McLaughlin, Ray Hall. So Ray Hall started on the front row. They're doing green flag pits. I'm pretty sure it was middle of the race. Comes into the pits. They raise his car. They take the tires off. They put the new tires on, but did they? So they lower the car. One of the other pit guys is flagging them down because they don't have the left rear tire on it. Had to re-raise the car. You see him inside the car. He slams his visor down. He slams his hands on the wheel. Not happy about it, obviously. He was pissed. And they finally get him back on the track, but it hosed his day, and he'd been doing pretty well. Colton Herta had a good chance to win it. He blew it going wide on a turn and got passed by 2 or 3 people on hotter tires. So all in all, it was a good race. The next race is in Toronto, and it's also a Honda 200 race. I don't know how Honda gets 2 Honda 200s in a row, but they do, with one in Mid-Ohio and one in Toronto. So that should be next Sunday, so enjoy that. And let's move on to Formula One, finally, the actual purpose of this show. So this weekend was the Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. I don't know where to begin. I mean, I do. I know exactly where I want to begin. I want to begin with track limits. So, as you guys know, anybody that's ever seen a race of any kind, the course is a course, and you're not supposed to go outside of it. I have never seen so many whiners and tattletales in my entire life than you heard on the radio in this race. But it was. I mean, we're going to get to Lewis Hamilton in a minute. That's not going to be an issue, but I think we had somewhere in the neighborhoods of 8 to 9 drivers that ended up with track limit penalties during the course of this race. There were over 1,500 steward investigations during the course of the race for track limits. And if you're wondering how can such a small team investigate all that, well, they don't. They've got a small group on staff there, obviously, at track, but they have a network site in Geneva that actually monitors and checks out and is watching video in a big war room, and they're the ones that are sending those calls in. But anyway, so we'll just go down the list and through the grid and just talk about this race. And we're going to start from the bottom. Nico Hülkenberg, and I've said it probably 3 weeks in a row, fastest one-lap car on the planet right now. The guy's legit, and he's really showing his mettle with Haas. I don't think he has any worry about keeping his seat. If anything, he needs to be going to them going, can you give me a car that lasts longer than 30 laps? That would be great. Yes, thank you. So qualifies 8, does well in the sprint this weekend, gets in the race. I'm pretty sure it was lap 1 or 2, and he pulled off, and it was reliability issue, and he was gone. Yuki Tsunoda, track limits, ends up P19. Kevin Magnussen pushed off into the road by Nick DeVries as usual. Their fight continues 3 races later. DeVries got his, but Magnussen's day was done, P18. Nick DeVries gets that penalty for pushing K-Mag into the gravel pit, and then gets guess you wait for it, track limit penalty. Oscar Piastri, pretty uneventful day, P16. Bottas, P15. Ocon ended up with 30 seconds worth of penalties. Yeah, track limits. And still finished 14. That's got to tell you how bad the other 6 drivers were that day. So 30 seconds worth of penalties, still comes in P14. Logan Sargent looked better this weekend. In fact, if you go to the Formula One site and you look up the power rankings, I think he was 4th just for this week, obviously, for kind of putting it together this weekend, and got nailed with track limit penalty and lost it, moved down to P13. Zhou Guanyu, uneventful day, P12. Alex Albon knew he should have been in the points this weekend, even said it himself in the post-race interview and on the post-race show. Had a decent car. I don't know if it was good enough for 10th. He seemed to think it was, but all these guys think their car is good enough for points. But I think he could have done a little bit better. The next guy in P10 was Gasly, and this guy really turned it up. So I think Gasly's one of the best wheel-to-wheel racers in the midfield, and I'm going to tell you why, because he's always there. I don't think anybody has more experience right now driving in traffic than Pierre Gasly. And it's starting to his talent is really starting to show and blossom at Alpine. That car is coming online. There's only going to be one thing that stops him, and we'll get to that later. But Pierre Gasly looked really good this weekend. Strong P10, got points for Alpine. Lance Stroll got P9, but technically it was P10, and we'll get to that when we get up closer to the top. But he looked okay. But I don't want to. You shouldn't be saying that any Aston Martin driver at this point or Ferrari driver is just okay. They need to be fighting for podiums constantly. They got the car for it, but wasn't able to do it. He had a decent drive Sunday. There was nothing spectacular about it, but anyway. Moving on to P8, Sir Lewis Hamilton. Oh God. Anyway. So I'm sure if you've been on TikTok or YouTube or anything and pulled up anything Lewis Hamilton, you're going to see tons of parodies and memes from Toto telling him to quit whining and this and that. But honest to God, every message, car has a lot of understeer. Car's slow, man. Car's slow. Did Perez get that same penalty I just got? Because he's going off the track on every lap. And just he would not. So here's my thing, and I've been one of his most avid supporters, which is weird because I normally am not, because he has been humbled and he's been showing that, and he's been doing well. And then he has a day like Sunday, and I get it, man, I get it. But sometimes you just gotta drive the fucking car. That's the car they pay you to be in. You can't tear the team down the entire time. And I realize you're trying to get it done, but race your race. Quit bitching so much. I'm just telling you, because it's just awful. And we'll get to why in a minute, but here we are. So George Russell finished ahead of his teammate. And really great post-race interview from Russell talking about, we're still not up there with Ferrari and Aston, and definitely not the Red Bulls, but we're going to keep looking at it. And he mentioned McLaren, who I'm going to get to in just a second. But next up is Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz got ripped off this weekend. You can disagree with me if you'd like. That's fine. That's your prerogative. But I'm the one sitting here right now, and I'm telling you, he got ripped off. He was faster than Charles Leclerc all weekend. He was faster in the race. He said it himself. I kind of got screwed by the whole let's be on a team thing. He is on a team. Yes. Was he faster Sunday? Yes. Did they show preferential treatment to Charles Leclerc? Absolutely. Double stacked them in the pits, still trying to, nobody does that more than Ferrari, and it's just so frustrating. It's frustrating to watch. It's frustrating to see, and hear the whole bit of it and how pissed they get. And then, Leclerc was talking about this was a great race, and I'm sure it was for him. He ended up in second place on the podium, and Sainz, who technically finished fourth, ended up in sixth because, I forgot, wait, track limits. Of course, he was tattled on to get his track limit violation, but a lot of people were. So Sainz ends up sixth instead of fourth, where he should have been. Alonso, he just kind of was out there driving this weekend, man. He didn't obviously make the podium. He wanted that pace that he had in the past few races. He said himself it wasn't there, and he went back and looked at Austria's race from last year, and they lost pace at Austria last year. I feel like this is a totally different car, though, but that's two Austrias in a row that they, didn't have it together. So obviously he'll spend some time in the shop this week trying to figure that out before they get to Great Britain and Silverstone for that race. Lando Norris. I'm not going to say I'm glad Chad's not here, but when I'm talking good things about McLaren, I'm kind of glad Chad's not here. Ferrari, does their thing, but McLaren also needs to be good for the sport. I did not see the moment with Lando and Lewis in the media pen. If any of you want to get on and find that and leave a comment, I'll post it up on there for you as well. McLaren showed to play this weekend. At least one of the cars did. Lando Norris drove the wheels off that car. He was obviously happy. He's been looking like he's trying to find the nearest bridge the past 3 weeks, and he was happy as a lark in post-race this week, and he should have been. They ran fast. They ran hard. They got up there. They stayed up there. He did well. He was tattling on Lewis, who was in front of him for quite a while, pretty much every lap. He went off the track again. I'm just going to shut up and somebody give him a penalty, that kind of stuff. And this is where I talked about it turned into a child's nursery. I think everybody just needed a Ziploc baggie of Cheerios and a nap. But anyway, McLaren showed back up to play, really brought an awesome upgrade package, and I'd like them to slide in the mix. And this references back to what I was discussing with Pierre Gasly, because what Alpine doesn't want right now is a strong McLaren, or maybe they do. Maybe getting a strong McLaren is what gives them the nudge to get that car back up where it needs to be, because it was McLaren and Alpine last year in one of the most fiercest F1 tug of wars you've ever seen. And, I'd like to see that again because I love watching those two fight. It's just fun to watch. But anyway, so Norris did great, and now we're at the top three, the podium. Checo had the yips the last few races. Obviously watched the fuel pod before the race this week and realized he needed to show up to play, and he did that. So my hat's off to Checo. Good job, sir. Way to get back up there. Now you just got to stay consistent and do it over, more than one race in a row. Charles Leclerc, good race. I don't think he was faster than his teammate, but he got preferential treatment. As big a Ferrari fan as I am, it still kind of pisses me off the way it went down, but still happy to see Ferrari on the podium. And last but not least, the namesake for the title of tonight's episode, because this guy, what can you keep saying week after week? It's like boring material. So fastest one in the only practice session of the weekend. Fastest one in the sprint shootout. Fastest one in the sprint. Pole position. Wins the race. He's just absolute domination right now, and nobody has an answer for it. And when I get to rip from the paddock here in a second, we can we'll discuss some of that. I just want to save it for that. But that was all 20 drivers at the Austrian GP and how it went. So with that, we are going to move on to rip from the paddock, which of course, did they? I didn't read anything on that, Eric. So they actually discussed the I think that ought to be just forbidden. I think they ought to get a 5-second penalty for tattling. I think they ought to leave that up to the chief principals are the ones that need to do the politicking, not the drivers. The drivers need to focus on, driving the race car. Anyway, maybe we should have thrown that in rip from the paddock, but I couldn't find anything on it. But to Rip from the Paddock, which are articles from various race-related sites where I don't actually read the article. We just take the headline and tear it apart and see what we think. So the first one is from Formula One, and it was actually in one of their text sections. And anyway, it was written by Julian Palmer, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But the article is, how hard is it for drivers to judge track limits when strapped into the cockpit? And this was written by Julian Palmer, who's a former driver. I think he had something like 14 F1 races or something. It wasn't crazy long career. But here's my thing, dude. This is a puff piece to lift up the drivers because, and I think it's crap, and I'm going to tell you why. These guys have been racing some form of automobile since karts, since they were, 7 to 10 years old, right? They've had track limits their whole life. They go to sleep looking at tracks in their mind while they're, we count sheep. That's what they're looking at. There's no reason an F1 driver wouldn't know he was over track limits. I don't, maybe in a pouring down rainstorm with zero visibility, but there is no way these guys don't know, at least when they're close. And Red Bull, when you're hanging it out there in turn 9 and 10, and Diddy knows now what I'm talking about because he's been on the Red Bull ring and he got into the F1 virtual scene this past week. When you're hanging it out there on 9 and 10, either you hit that turn correctly and you come into it correctly and you accelerate out of it correctly, or you go flying and you're coming way out into the paint. And those guys were doing it. And I think 90% of it was they saw the guy in front of them do it, and they're thinking, well, if he's not getting in trouble for it, then I'm going to do it too. And I get that, except the guy in front of you was getting in trouble because almost everybody got a penalty this weekend. So I think it was kind of a turd article to write because I think, you're actually insulting the drivers, I think, because I think they really know what they're doing out there. The second one, why Ferrari's Austria updates were another important step in getting the Scuderia on par with the Red Bull. No. I know I had a really bad day today, so I know there's a negative tinge to some of these, but it also makes me just have no bullshit meter on some of these articles. Scuderia is nowhere near him. Nobody's on par. Checo's on his team, and he's not on par. Were they close this weekend? Yeah, but it was all strategy based that made them close. It wasn't race close. Coming out of the pits or in and off the pits or whatever it was, and he passed him right back. So if closer, yes. On par, not even close. I don't think anybody's close to that car. Maybe Elon Musk with one of his Falcon X heavy rockets after it's hit third stage, maybe, but not any of the other F1 drivers. So third one, Gasly admits McLaren's gains are not a good sign. No, they're not. We just kind of discussed this, but they're not a good sign for Alpine, but they can be because it can, another team's fortune can really inspire the team that needs to step it up. And Alpine's one of those teams that I know F1 Farmer and I were talking about it in the race that felt like it went till 3:00 in the morning that, Alpine had it going and just blew it. And coming out of last year, everybody thought they were going to be, third, fourth fastest team on the grid. Nobody saw Aston Martin coming. Everybody thought Ferrari would flop, and Mercedes Zero Pod put them, somewhere in mid to late field. But we opened the season up, and Alpine was terrible. And so was McLaren, but they both were. And these were 4 and 5 teams last year. So, yeah, I think it's not a good sign just in general from a competition standpoint because it's going to create a war. But I think it's good for the sport that both of those teams step it up. And lastly, Max Verstappen. I knew I had them. Speaking of Ferrari, and this was in my Google feed, and I was like, no, I'm not even pulling that up. But I'm pretty sure this was straight up hubris article and talking about when Ferrari and Max were switching out the leads. And do I think he's correct that he had Ferrari the whole time? Yes, I do. Do you say that out loud? No. This goes back to the Michael Jordan, LeBron James GOAT debate where Michael never says he's the GOAT and LeBron says it whenever he wants. You let somebody else say that stuff. You let Christian Horner get on there and say, oh, yeah, Max had him. You know, he wasn't playing with him or toying with him, but he knew he had him. The car's a better car, and that's really all you have to say, and those are facts. But, you know, the hubris is standing there, and those guys were probably within earshot because, you know, they're all gathered in that little pen for the post-race, and just, yeah, I knew I had Ferrari. The updates didn't scare me, this and that, whatever. So, you know, maybe some of you like that, maybe some of you don't. I don't, not a big fan of that. Just let your driving do the job for you. But that was ripped from the paddock for this week. So we are, and I'm going to try to work this out since I'm normally not the production guy. But we are going to do podiums and back markers, and I'm going to try to do this. Hopefully this is not crazy loud. Okay, there we go. All right, so my podium this weekend, number 3 is going to be Alex Palou in the IndyCar race because McLaren, or, you know, excuse me, Alex Palou's been killing it all year. He came out of nowhere. A lot of people thought this was Pato O'Ward's year or even Newgarden again or McLaughlin, and Alex Palou's come out of nowhere and done a great job, and I don't see it ending anytime soon. He's on fire right now. He's got some challengers, but he's fought them off, and I look forward to seeing what he can do for the rest of the season. Number 2 is going to be McLaren for Formula One because I picked them to finish 9th, I think, or dead last even for this year's Constructors' Championship, and I'm actually worried about that now because I don't think they're going to be 9th or 10th. Yeah, we're far into the season, but not too far, not even halfway. But I think if they keep on track where they are now, they will definitely, you know, jump up there a little bit. So, I mean, I'm not saying they could hit 5th, but, you know, 6 or 7 possibly. Yeah, sure, absolutely. And then last but not least is going to be Shane Van Gisbergen. Here's a guy in 60 years, NASCAR. It's been 60 years since NASCAR had a driver win in their debut race. 60 years. That's a long time ago. So my congrats to Van Gisbergen for doing such a great job this weekend, and to Trackhouse Racing for putting him in the car. That was a smart move. You guys running supercar V8s, and it was a really smart move to put him in that car. I hope he stays with NASCAR, but I mean, he could probably name his ticket in the States right now, IMSA, any of those things, assuming that's where he wants to go. Or assuming anybody can afford him, NASCAR would probably be the only ones that could. So anyway, that's the top of my podium. All right, back markers. Where'd it go? There it is. See, I normally don't have to do this part. All right. Back markers. And it's not even playing yet. There we go. My first one is going to be the FIA because I really thought the track limit piece was completely botched this weekend. I thought it was ridiculous. Some of them were like, there was times it looked like a couple of those cars still had their leading edge of their trackside tires were still barely there, and they were calling them out for it. And it looked like some people got away with it that had just blatant ones. And I'm thinking of Checo for one, because I saw him fly completely off into the paint, didn't get anything. So if you're going to do it fair, or don't do it at all. And that's my piece on that. Number 2, Marcus Ericsson, IndyCar, because he's not a mistakes guy in IndyCar. He you know, he's the clean Marine, and it was just a boneheaded mistake coming out of that one turn and getting into Rosenquist and almost just riding on top of it. It was almost a repeat of the wreck from Monza where Verstappen ended up on top of Hamilton's car. So that was my number 2. And number 1, because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. Nick DeVries. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure I'm not the only podcaster or content creator out there. It's just, this guy causes some kind of problem every week. and now he's got what looks to be a glaring issue with K-Mac, which is not really the guy you want to get into a struggle with, I don't think, because K-Mac's going to come back at you. So, something needs to be done. I don't know if you just go ahead and bring in Liam Lawson at Alpha Tauri or whatever. I think it's pretty safe. It won't be Danny Rick, but I can see Liam Lawson getting in that car after summer break. So, which is, fingers crossed on that one. But guys, that's my podiums and back markers. And with that, I'm going to call it an evening. I want to thank everybody for listening and watching whenever you do that. Make sure you hit like and subscribe for us, and add us to your list so that we're in your ear every week at least. Next week we'll be talking about Silverstone. Obviously, that's going to be the showcase piece next week because it's one of everybody's favorite Grand Prix in Formula One. And we're not very far from the summer break, and I'm just going to go ahead and give you a heads up. I'm probably going to take a couple weeks during the summer break, so that's still a couple races away. We still got time, but I just wanted to go ahead and plant that seed out there. 2 weeks, Mr. Diddy, until Goodwood Festival of Speed. I haven't seen the docket yet on who's going to be there, but I'm looking forward to watching that. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me and we can all get together and watch it, that'd be wonderful. But thanks everybody for being here tonight. Thanks for watching. Catch me on Twitter at jneil729 or Twitch. And you guys have a great evening and a good rest of your week. Thank you very much. You guys were killing me with the Swedish chef stuff, man. That was nobody actually threw up a picture of the guy though. That that would have been cool. I would have definitely posted that up on the screen. Yay, after party. Here, let me hide this thing real quick. I need an after party screen, man. I don't have an after party screen. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I need an after party banner. So, yeah, Farmer, if you want to design a fuel pod after party banner, that would be wonderful. The Lando Lewis thing. Who's that? Lando's Lewis thing was hilarious. Lewis told him he would have done the same thing. They laughed. I can see that. One thing you can count on with Tattletales is they will stick together. That's what makes them so annoying. If they're in multiples of two, you've really got problems. It's like a pack of wolves. Hey, Diddy, you still here? Did you leave? Did you buck out? Oh, I think he left. I think he was out. Oh, crap. So apparently Diddy and I have very, very similar musical tastes. He's like, I love cake. And I love kale. Oh, yeah, also cake. Sorry. Freaking autocorrect. I think I'm going to get on ACC in a minute here and try out the 2023 GT3 cars. I'll throw it up on Twitch if you guys want to watch. I'll stay up if you're teaching some tech stuff and using me as the guinea pig for me. That's fine. Yeah, I could have went the other way for he's going the distance, and I was going to use Bette Midler's from a distance, but I just didn't think that would go over so well. We really ought to think about doing a watch along for Silverstone. If you're interested, we need to probably talk about it before Friday, I would think. Yeah, yeah. It was weird. I'm watching that IndyCar race, and all I'm thinking is, please, Roman, just finish it. And he got squirrely on the last lap, and I thought, are you serious, dude? Can you try not to be you for 2 minutes? Yeah, we need to see if we can figure out how we'd want to set up a watch along, though. I mean, obviously we'd be watching the race, and then the cameras would be just facing us. Um, we need to figure out the sound thing, because we noticed when Chad and I were in the same room, once we started using StreamYard, it was kind of tough, and we reached out to StreamYard and talked to them about it, and they're like, hey, if you don't have a separate sound room and this and that, it can be tough and this and that and whatever. But we were trying to mute certain things, so we only had the outgoing sound from one thing, so it wouldn't reverb in the mic. But it was very difficult. Of course, we watch hundreds of other podcasts where they're sitting right next to each other. Oh crap! I forgot about Basil. Yeah, I know you do. Well, guys, I think I'm gonna get off here, and I'm probably gonna get on some ACC maybe for a little bit and test out those 23 cars and see how they feel around a couple of courses. So thanks very much for joining the after party, and I guess I will see you guys later.